Hello everyone, we are presenting the pre-recording session of Dr. Stoyana. Welcome Stoyana. And Dr. Stoyana Natseva is the founder and CEO of Happy Life Academy and an internationally recognized expert in identity transformation, personal development, and human potential. She is the author of 15 best-selling books and creator of the Direct Change Solutions DCS methodology, helping individuals and organizations achieve lasting transformation through her research, coaching, and international speaking. She empowers people to overcome limiting belief and unlock their highest potential. Her work bridges psychology, leadership, and practical strategies to inspire purposeful and sustainable success. That was a great and fantastic bio, Stayana, and the stage is all yours.
Hello, it is a true honor for me to be here before you today, and I will start with a confession. I spent 27 years of my life in corporate banking, a world of numbers, analysis, and rational decisions. And it was precisely there, among the most rational people you can imagine, that I first noticed something I couldn't explain. Smart, educated, and successful people who knew what they needed to do with their lives, yet they didn't do it. And 8 years ago, I left that world to seek the answer to a single question. Why do people so strongly want to change their lives and yet continue to repeat the same patterns? Why do intelligent and motivated people end up in the same relationships over and over again? Why do various entrepreneurs with excellent ideas year after year end up holding back the growth of their own businesses? Why does a person who knows what needs to be done actually not do it? Over these 8 years, I worked with thousands of people, entrepreneurs, doctors, psychologists, teachers, parents, managers, and I noticed something that changed the direction of my entire search. Almost no one suffers from a lack of information. We live in an era with the most accessible knowledge in human history. Everyone knows, everyone understands. And yet, anxiety, depression, loneliness, and professional burnout remain among the greatest challenges of our time. According to the latest data from the World Health Organization, more than 1 million people worldwide live with a mental disorder. Over 1 billion people around the world live with a mental disorder, with anxiety and depressive conditions among the most common complaints. Therefore, the problem is not in the information. The problem lies elsewhere, and today I want to show you exactly where. And not as a philosophy, but as a science. The brain does not carry out your goals. The brain carries out your identity. When I left banking, I went back to university. Psychology, educational psychology, behavioral sciences, neuroscience, doctoral dissertations on the mechanisms of change. I wasn't looking for the next motivational lecture, but for the mechanism. And science actually gives a surprisingly clear answer. Research in behavioral psychology, for example, the long-term work of Professor Wendy Wood from the University of Southern California, shows that a significant part of our daily behavior is not conscious decisions at all. These are habits, automatisms. They are maintained by brain systems in which the basal ganglia play an important role. These are deep structures associated with the learning of habits and the automation of behavior. Nobel laureate Daniel Kahneman describes this as two systems of thinking: slow thinking, which is logical, conscious, and deliberate. It is precisely this system that sets the goals. And fast thinking, this is automatic, emotional, and instantaneous. It is exactly this system that stands behind some of our quick, everyday reactions and judgments. Here lies the conflict that explains almost every failed new life starting from January 1st or from Monday. We often formulate our goals through our slow thinking, but a large part of our daily decisions are actually influenced by fast, automatic patterns. And what actually programs the so-called fast thinking? What actually determines what is automatic for a person? The answer is what I call identity in my work. The deep, largely unconscious answer to the question, who am I? Not what I want, not what I dream of, not what I believe I am. Modern neuroscience has something to say about this process. When we talk about ourselves and our own story, areas of the so-called default mode network are activated. It includes the medial prefrontal cortex, the posterior cingulate cortex, and other interconnected areas, and is involved in autobiographical memory, self-reflection, and the construction of our personal narrative. This network is especially active when our attention is not focused on a specific external task. Of course, identity is not located in a single structure of the brain. It arises from the interaction between memory, emotions, habits, relationships, and the stories we tell about ourselves. But the effect is real. The brain tells us the story of who we are and then makes decisions that actually align exactly with that story. People do not build their lives according to their goals. They build their lives according to their identity. And until this internal response changes, life continues to reproduce the same results. How is this identity actually formed? The neurobiology of who am I is one of the most fascinating topics I work on. Let me ask you a question. Why do two people, two individuals who go through exactly the same circumstances end up building completely different lives? Why does one child who grew up in poverty go on to create a successful business, while another child from the same background spends their whole life believing they have no chance? The answer is not just about luck and circumstances, nor is it about people's intelligence. A huge role is played by the way the nervous system is shaped by experience. In 1949, Canadian psychologist Donald Hebb formulated a principle that today forms the foundation of the entire neuroscience of learning. Neurons that fire together, wire together, and this changes the entire field of neuroscience. Every repeated experience actually strengthens certain neural pathways. In early childhood, the brain goes through an extremely intense period of creating and restructuring synaptic connections, that is, the connections between neural cells. And here comes some good news that was unknown for a long time. For decades, it was believed that the brain was almost unchangeable after childhood. Today, however, we know that this is not the case at all. Thanks to neuroplasticity, the brain's ability to reorganize itself, the nervous system can develop and form new connections throughout a person's entire life. It is precisely this ability that is one of the biological prerequisites for psychological change to truly be possible throughout life. And what does it record in these connections? Every glance, every word, every judgment, praise, criticism, every pain. The child's brain does not simply record events, it records conclusions about itself. And when a conclusion is repeated enough times, for example, others do better, it could have been more, I am not enough, this is not enough. This stops being just a thought and becomes a neural highway. I am not good enough. I do not deserve love. Money is dangerous, for example. I cannot be successful. And the most interesting thing, a person rarely realizes these beliefs. They don't sound like thoughts, they sound like the truth. And here comes the second key discovery of modern neuroscience. The brain is not a camera that records reality. The brain is a prediction machine. It is continuously and persistently predicting exactly what will happen, based on all of its previous personal experiences, and it then very carefully and selectively chooses to notice only the specific details that confirm its initial prediction. Psychology calls this selective attention and confirmation bias, our tendency to seek out and see evidence for what we already deeply believe. In practice, this means the following: we do not see the world as it is. We see it as we are ourselves. A person who has the identity, I am not good enough, actually notices different things than someone with the identity, I am doing great. The same room, the same conversation, the same opportunities, yet two completely different experiences, two entirely different worlds. What does the person do? The first person doubts themselves, procrastinates, accepts less than they deserve, works harder than everyone else, and never feels enough. And then they say, my life isn't going well. The truth is, life isn't against them. They simply live in a world that is shaped according to their own expectations. And behavior is actually just the tip of the iceberg. Beneath it lie beliefs, and beneath beliefs are emotional experiences. And at the very deepest level is identity. Why does change fail? Because the brain protects what is already familiar. If identity creates life, can identity actually be changed? First, I had to understand why we usually don't change, why no motivation can last more than a few weeks, why positive affirmations in front of the mirror don't really work. And here again, science is unequivocal. First, for the brain, the familiar is equal to safe. The amygdala, which is the almond-shaped nucleus, the brain's alarm system, often reacts to uncertainty as if it were a potential threat. A new identity, no matter how desirable, is actually uncertain. The brain doesn't know what comes next. The old identity, no matter how painful, is predictable. The old reality is also predictable, and the nervous system tends to favor what is predictable. As early as 1957, Leon Festinger described cognitive dissonance, a deep internal tension we experience when something contradicts our self-image. The brain often resolves this conflict not by changing the identity, but by rejecting the new information. Tell a person who believes I don't deserve success that they are talented, and they will reply, I just got lucky. And that's not modesty, that's cognitive dissonance in action. Identity always protects itself. It doesn't protect the truth, it protects what is familiar. That's exactly why so many people unconsciously sabotage their own success. Not because they don't want to succeed, but because their nervous system still doesn't recognize success as safe. And that's precisely why methods that only work from the outside, like change your habits, change your schedule, change your goals, so often fail in the long run. They rely on conscious effort to overcome the automatic pattern every single day. But willpower is actually a finite resource, whereas identity is not. And in fact, that's the magic. This isn't science. If identity is built according to neural laws, then it can be rebuilt according to neural laws as well. For a long time, neuroscience believed that deep emotional memories were recorded once and for all, that the past was fixed. However, at the beginning of this century, a series of studies by, for example, the highly cited neurobiologist Karim Nader revealed something remarkable: the phenomenon of memory reconsolidation, that is, the rewriting of memories. When an emotional memory is reactivated under certain conditions, it can temporarily become unstable and susceptible to being updated. It is important to clarify that not every act of recalling actually changes the memory. Change occurs only under specific conditions. Its application in practice continues to be studied, and yet the conclusion is fundamental. You cannot change what has already happened to you, but you can change the way the experience is organized, perceived, and connected to the present. Neuroscience shows that memory is not a static archive, but actually a dynamic system. On this scientific foundation, I built my internal autobiographical map, my scientific model, and the method of direct change, a structured methodology for the transformation of identity. At its core lies the model I developed in my doctoral dissertation on the internal autobiographical map. It is about the way a person has organized the story of their life and the conclusions they have drawn about themselves. The methodology does not begin with the question of what you want to achieve. It starts with the much more important question: who is the person currently creating your present life? We work with a clear sequence. First, diagnosis. What identity lies behind the current results? Second, awareness. Which beliefs support and which experiences have created this identity and this reality? Third, reconstruction. We work on updating the meaning that a person has assigned to the experience itself. This stage is conceptually connected to scientific research on plasticity and reconsolidation of memory. And fourth, embodiment. The new self image is reinforced through repetition, through new decisions, and real life experience. When this happens, the behavior is no longer forced, it becomes much more natural. Not because someone is forcing the person, but because their automatic reactions start working for them, not against them. We do not teach people to pretend. We do not teach them to think positively while feeling broken inside. We work with the cause, not the symptoms. Today, an entire educational ecosystem works according to this methodology, and this is the Happy Life Academy and the International Association of Professional Coaches and Therapists. Over 100,000 participants in our trainings and more than 3,000 certified specialists work with programs that are offered in more than 50 countries. But behind every number stands a human experience and a human life. I want to tell you about a woman. I'm not going to say her name. She was very successful, educated, with a good job. People thought she had everything, but inside she lived with the sentence, I'm not good enough. As a child, she was constantly compared to others. Others are doing better. You can do more. Thousands of repetitions. Years later, no one was telling her this anymore, but she kept repeating it to herself unconsciously every day. She worked harder than everyone else, but she didn't believe she actually deserved her success. She received awards, recognition, and would respond, I just got lucky. Do you remember? This is cognitive dissonance. When we started working together, we didn't work on her confidence. Confidence is a symptom. We worked on her identity. We went back to the experiences that had created the sentence, I'm not good enough, and worked on their meaning. And after working on these internal models, something started to change. She no longer behaved like someone who was trying to be successful. She started living like someone who knows her own worth well enough. And a second story about a famous entrepreneur, extremely intelligent, knowledge, ideas, opportunities. But every time the business started to grow, he would find a way to stop it himself. He would suddenly change direction, start a new project, procrastinate. When we worked together, we discovered the recording. As a child, he had heard, rich people are bad people. Money corrupts people. Don't show off too much. Consciously, he wanted success, but subconsciously, he believed that success was dangerous. And when the automatic pattern is so deeply ingrained, it often overrides conscious intention. On a psychological level, growth was associated with danger, guilt, and the risk of rejection. And every time something inside him would hit the brakes. But after working on these patterns, he stopped fighting with himself, and the business began to grow in an entirely natural way. Not because he learned a new strategy, but because his nervous system gradually began to recognize success as something safe. We live in a paradoxical time. We have never had so much information, yet there have never been so many lost people. We have artificial intelligence, but we don't know how to actually be happy. We invest enormous resources in the development of technology and much less in the development of people. I am convinced that this century will not be only the century of artificial intelligence, it will also be the century of human transformation. Because no matter how smart machines become, our lives will always be defined by the decisions we make as humans. And decisions are born from our identity. When we are born, no one gives us a manual on how to live. We teach our children mathematics, physics, chemistry, but almost no one teaches them how to work with their emotions, how to build confidence, how to manage fear, how to create healthy relationships. My dream is that in decades to come, this will be a natural part of education because every person who transforms themselves changes the lives of their family, their children, and the people they meet every day. Change never stops with just one person. It spreads just as one light ignites another without losing its own. I would like to finish with a question for each one of you. Imagine that 5 years from now, your life is exactly as it is today. The same thoughts, the same fears, the same decisions, the same results. Would you be happy? And if the answer is no, don't wait for life to change. Start from the place where every real change begins, from yourself, from your own identity. Because, and you already know this, not just as inspiration, but as a principle supported by psychology and neuroscience, it is difficult to create a new life if we continue to act from our old identity. Or to put it in my own words, we cannot create a new life with our old identity. When we change the way we see ourselves, our decisions change. And when our decisions change, our actions change as well. When our actions change, the results change too. And the world starts to look different. Not because the world has changed, but because we ourselves have changed. The greatest transformation is not to become someone else. The greatest transformation is to become the person you have always been capable of being, your best self. Thank you.
Yeah, Stoyana, that was a great talk. We really enjoyed your talk. We have a few questions from our audience. We directly posted to your email, yeah, and you can answer there. Thank you, Stoyana.